Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Prado 120 Adventures. Grab yourself a cuppa or a coldie, and today we're going to be going through how you can get more power and performance from your 3-litre 1KZ-TE turbo diesel engine. Stay tuned.
Prado 120 Adventures, time to hit the road.
So before you actually start looking at improving the performance of your engine, you should really look at getting it back to its factory efficiency settings, which could include things like looking at getting new injectors done. Depending on how many kilometers your engine has done, especially if it's done like a similar amount to mine, then it will definitely need doing if they haven't been done in like the last 150,000 Ks. And the good thing is for this engine, they're cheap as, and you can get reconditioned ones for $70 a head, so I'd go with that option. Making sure your injectors are all good, looking at doing a full service as well, so oils, oil filter, fuel filter, air filter, all that sort of stuff. Grab a scan tool and check if there's been any faults come up for any of the sensors on the engine. There's not a lot on this engine that would influence your how it fuels and how the engine runs, but things like your vacuum hoses for your boost, check them for any cracks or anything like that. Check your filter as well, and also check your temperature sensor on the side of the intercooler, and if any of those are showing not the correct value, then you'll be getting less power and you'll be getting worse fuel economy. And that's the other thing as well, is as you're improving the efficiency of the engine, it doesn't have to work so hard, so it's also going to be using less fuel to achieve the same amount of power. Another thing you could look at doing is getting a full intake clean. So that means taking all the intake apart, all the way from the turbo through the intercooler, through the throttle body, through the intake manifold, and then into the actual block itself. If you pull all those sort of things apart, take them off the car, cover them in kerosene or oven cleaner also works, and get all that carbon buildup off, because that'll actually be constricting the amount of airflow that's going through those pipes and everything. So instead of having a 2-inch pipe, you may only have a 1 or ½ inch because of the amount of carbon that's coked onto it. So that would be my first step if you're looking to improve the performance of your engine, is bring it back to factory spec, clean it all up, get it working so it is as efficient as it can be. I'd also like to point out that I'm not a qualified mechanic. All the advice I'm giving out is from my own experience working on my own car and how it performs to me in the real world. So if you're in any doubt or have any questions, make sure to speak to your own qualified mechanic before you go playing around with the performance of your engine. Once you've got all that done, you can now look at improving how the engine gets air in and out of itself, so improving that efficiency even further. So that includes putting a snorkel on to raise your air intake up and get that cleaner, cooler air, and also looking at putting a full turbo back exhaust on. These engines respond really, really well to opening up, especially the dump pipe section, but the whole lot as well. So fitting a 3-inch turbo back exhaust will make big gains on this engine. So stage 2 of this performance journey I call reaching the limits, and there's something I really need to stress to you guys beforehand, so I'm actually going to turn to camera 2 so you get the point across even more. Hi camera 2, this is Todd here. Just wanted to really stress out that you need to have done all the previous steps beforehand before you get to here, because if you don't, your exhaust is going to be tiny, your intake's all going to be clogged up, you're going to have old injectors, that sort of stuff, and you're probably not going to get as much benefit out of it, and you may end up actually doing damage to your engine and end up with danger to the manifold. So make sure you've done all the previous steps beforehand before you start moving on. So stage 2 is really about reaching those limits that the factory ECU would allow you to get to, and that includes increasing the boost pressure. So on this engine you can safely increase the boost pressure to about 14 psi. If you go over that, so I think over about 14.2, 14.5, the ECU will sense overboosting and actually cut the fueling, so you'll end up in kind of a limp mode sort of thing. Only lasts as long until that boost level drops back down again, but it's very annoying. So you can actually increase the boost level on these to about 14. Best way to do that is grab yourself a boost tee or a boost controller, wire it into the factory wastegate, in place of, sorry. And after you've done that, you then are going to need a boost gauge in the car, so it's actually reading your boost levels, and any other diagnostic equipment you might need as well. So you can use that to then fine tune your boost levels up to about 14 psi, and that will really get the engine singing. So now we're up to stage 3, which I would call pushing the factory limits. Here we're going to be aiming for about 18 psi of boost. So in order to do that, we're going to need to do a few more additions and changes. First of all, because you're going to be increasing the boost, you're going to be increasing the air temperature. So the best way to combat that is to fit a bonnet scoop. I've got a 2015 Hilux scoop on mine, but any Hilux scoop like a 2-fin or a 3-fin will also work. as long as it sits over the intercooler, it'll give much better cooling than the factory ducting in the bonnet. After you've done that, you're going to look at changing over your MAP sensor. So this tells the ECU what sort of boost pressure it's actually seeing. So changing that out for an aftermarket 3-bar MAP sensor will mean that the ECU will only see 14 psi, what we're actually running about 18 psi. You'll also need a EGT setup as well to read what your exhaust gas temperatures are. So this will sit in your dump pipe. It'll tell you how hot the gases are going out, and if they get too hot, you're going to start burning piston rings and that sort of stuff. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that to make sure you're not exceeding anything too crazy. And once you're there, you can look at increasing your boost up to about 18 psi, and you'll find it will really sing along. This is actually where the setup I've got in the car at the moment, and I'm really happy with how it's performing. Beyond the setup that I have now, you start heading towards what I would call stage 4 mods. So this is starting to look at breaking the factory limits and going beyond them.
Even further beyond!
Here you're going to be looking at doing mechanical fuel pumps. You're going to be looking at putting in oversized injectors, changing your intercooler setup for something more efficient. Might be going like a front mount or something like that. You might be doing a piggyback ECU to change over all those different parameters, or even putting in like a diesel chip or something like that, because there you can start to increase the fuel flow of the factory pump. But depending on your kilometers of your car, your fuel pump may need a rebuild before you actually start seeing some good gains out of it. So yeah, beyond that, it's starting to get into a real whirlpool of you could just go forever until you blow the engine up. But for me, I'm happy back here at stage 3. I get really good fuel economy out of mine. I get about 13-14 liters per 100. I get really good performance. You know, it's never going to like beat Corvettes down a drag strip or something like that, but I feel really happy with it. It gets uphill. Anyone who's down this way, I can get to the top of Collie Hill, keeping 100 k's an hour, so that's a big benefit. And there's also the factor of price as well. I mean, once you're getting into those stage 4 mods, you're talking about a few grand each to sort of start setting up separate components. And once you start looking at the number of kilometers you have on your car, you start looking at the actual value of the car, whether it's worth spending 20 grand on a 15 grand car. These are all personal choices, but for me, I'm very happy with where the car is at the moment, so that's where I'm going to stay. So there you have it, a few little hints and tips about getting a bit more performance out of your KZ-TE engine. So now all that's left to do is really get the car going and go and enjoy it.